On Nationwide this evening, an Irish man way ahead of his time who achieved so much for Shannon and the Midwest. We focus on the life story of Brendan O'Regan, whose efforts to promote business, tourism and trade left a mark on the surrounding counties of Limerick, Clare, Tipperary and Kerry. You're welcome to Nationwide and you're welcome to 6 Mile Bridge in County Clare. We're here because this was the birthplace 100 years ago of a man who has had a unique and lasting influence both nationally and globally. His name was Brendan O'Regan, and Dr. O'Regan was an economic and a social pioneer and also a visionary who was deeply involved also in peace and in conflict resolution in the North. Marion Malone has been assessing the impact of this remarkable man.
It's hard to even imagine what Shannon and the Midwest region would be like without the legacy of Brendan O'Regan. After all, among the gifts he has left us with are the Shannon Free Zone with its 8,000 jobs, Shannon Town with almost 10,000 inhabitants, the first duty-free shop in the world, the innovative Shannon College of Hotel Management, Bunratty Castle and other developed heritage sites.
One of the early pieces of innovation was actually the transit opportunity that the airport represented. So a lot of flights stopped here on their way to Europe and on their way back to the States, and really Brendan's vision was to try and pull those down out of the sky and make them stop here. So he had innovation such as Bunratty Castle, where they had an overnight stay and they went to a banquet and whatnot. But equally he had other visionary items that you wouldn't have thought of. Things like mail order back in the late 50s was founded here in Shannon. A huge business at its time, and it was almost the Amazon of its time. And we continue that spirit today with our own Shannon online duty-free shop, and we sell all over the world. So again, that's really inspiring.
This dream that people would cross the Atlantic in commercial aircraft was an exciting thing, more exciting, I think, than the moonshots even now. So that the first land planes that arrived, particularly at Rhinana, the Skymasters, as they call them, looked huge to us, and the American crewmen coming off, were to us like the spacemen are today. They were remarkable.
He was an innovator, he was a visionary. People felt that they worked with him, not for him. As a Clare person, I have always been inspired by him. I think that the legacy for us today, in Shannon today, we inherited his business legacy. And we walk in his gigantic footsteps, and we continue to try to actually live up to his expectations.
I'm not sure we'd be here in the guise we are today, only for him. But I think most importantly, we wouldn't have the can-do attitude that we have and the innovation that we have without him continuing to inspire us.
With so much of his time being taken up with advancing his pioneering ideas for the benefit of the region and the country, how was Brendan as a family man?
He was the most wonderful father. I never ever felt I didn't get enough of his time. We were included in a lot of what he did. I have some amazing memories, particularly from the early days, of being with him when he was showing visitors, who were really probably quite important visitors, around. He was huge fun, really, really great fun, because we were always doing family adventures, picnics, lighting open fires. But often these things tied in with, what he might be looking for work, and trying to get ideas of things. And even on family holidays, it would be, in later life when we started to travel abroad, he would be still looking for ideas that he could bring back and introduce here. He was interested in everybody, right? And that included his children. So he was genuinely interested in what our concerns were. So he was actually quite a confidant. You felt you could take him into your confidence. And I did on many occasions.
You got to accentuate the positive feeling, find it to negative, like charm to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between.
Following a few years in hotel management, Brendan was appointed as catering controller at Foynes Flying Boat Air Base and was transferred to Rhinana Airport, now Shannon, with the advent of transatlantic land planes in 1945.
Brendan O'Regan was an exceptionally talented person. He was highly creative. He was the kind of person who could come up with great ideas, or from his travelling overseas, he could see possibilities that could be relevant to Ireland. And his primary objective in life was the development of Shannon Airport and the creation of employment and economic and social wealth in the region. On initial encounter, he was quite a shy, but once you got to know him, he was an extremely warm and friendly person, and he never differentiated between anybody on the staff. And whether it was the most senior or the most junior person, he always welcomed their ideas. And in a sense, his greatest quality was to do with customer service. That he was all the time interested in how people were greeted on the personal element. And that same atmosphere has survived in Shannon and in the folk park.
1950 was the year Brendan set up the world's first duty-free shop at Shannon. But it also marked another major turning point in his life when he married Englishwoman Rita Barrow.
She met him originally when she was sent over by the company she was working for, which was an American airline company, to see what was happening in Shannon. So which was quite a lot for someone who was basically somebody's PA to do at the time. So she obviously had huge talent that was being recognised for the company that she was working with, which once she became Dad's wife, his career was what she worked for, but they worked together as a team.
Brendan could see that for Shannon, and indeed Ireland, to benefit from tourism revenue, high-quality accommodation was essential. And so in 1951, he founded the Shannon College of Hotel Management, now part of NUI Galway, and another first in Ireland. He also served as chairman of Board Fáilte for 16 years.
We saw a niche in providing tourism professionals and hotel management professionals to the industry, both in Ireland but around the world. And there are, thousands and thousands of graduates now representing Ireland internationally. But equally, they're representing this country here with tourists every day, week in, week out, and it's a fabulous, fabulous legacy. And I know he was a huge fan of education and the value it brought to people. So when it was founded in 1951, it was a small college, 10 or 12 people, but now it's grown to in excess of 100 graduates a year, every year, and all of them are placed in work. So they have a 100% success rate, and that continues to this day, well in excess of 50, 60 years later. So I'm sure that's something that he'd be very proud of.
He set up a hugely successful global mail order service in 1954, a precursor to today's online shopping. But the late 1950s saw the introduction of the jet plane. This threatened the very future of the Shannon region, as the improved design of the aircraft meant they no longer had to land at Shannon for refuelling on transatlantic flights, and passenger numbers began to dwindle.
It was in this context that the efforts to make the Shannon area attractive to tourists were undertaken, with very noticeable success. And at the same time, Brendan O'Regan made it his business to do something about the difficult days which seemed to lie ahead for Shannon. Briefly, his problem was this: how can we get along with less passenger traffic at the airport? And his answer: air freight.
And one of the things that he did was set up the Shannon Free Airport Development Company, later called Shannon Development, and the purpose of that organisation was to enable regional development and enable economic development in the west coast of Ireland through the development of infrastructure, road infrastructure, and commercial property infrastructure. Throughout the following decades, it grew very significantly. In 1965, 1/3 of manufacturing product exported out of Ireland came from this business park in the early years of its evolution.
The 60s, 70s and 80s were a boom time for Shannon development, and indeed it became the blueprint for many economic and free zones around the world.
for quite a number of years now, going back to 1962 when I went to Taiwan at the request of the government there to advise on the industrial free zone idea. We've been getting reacting ad hoc to requests from developing countries for our experience, which was being fastened on. We respond to requests from other countries to pass on the Irish experience.
The Chinese government have used this sort of blueprint and model to build its own economic zones across most of the Chinese cities. So you could say that the Chinese growth today has been based on the free zone model that was developed in Shannon originally.
In 1978, Brendan founded Cooperation North, later to become Cooperation Ireland, and in 1984, the Irish Peace Institute. His goal was to overcome violence and unemployment through economic, cultural and social cooperation north and south of the border.
He was humble, he was considerate, kind to everybody, he was a workaholic. He was also helpful. He would help people and steer them in the right direction. There was nobody else like him. We went on with the work, it gathered momentum, there were certain achievements, there were some disappointments, and that was life. But all the time, he had us that you must press on, you must do the job, because he once said to me, I think he said, the single most important thing in Ireland at the moment is to help the peace work ongoing.
The canvas, I think, that really matters is the broad canvas of a world that has to get rid of war. I mean, that is an enormous step forward, and it will come about. And it will come about, and Shannon can be in a central position insofar as Shannon has a world school of hotel management, and it has now agreed with the Irish Peace Institute and the University of Galway that it will only give the final hotel degree when the pupil has done a course in world peace.
Dr. Brendan O'Regan, CBE, was a visionary of startling proportions who realised so many of what must have seemed like impossible dreams over his 90 years, to the incalculable benefit of his country, his region and his community. During his lifetime, he was heaped with innumerable honours, but his enduring legacy must lie in the promising future he created for thousands of people worldwide.
Brendan has a huge legacy. It's important that it's remembered, and it's important that the work that he did is recognised. And we want to ensure that in the decades to come, people remember Brendan O'Regan, what he started, and our goal here is to continue to build infrastructure so that his legacy does continue into the decades to come.
I think Shannon will be a place that will be a creative place, always. At the time of the threat of the jet, I remember saying at that time that we have to reach up into the sky and bring those jets down. But you bring them down with the brain and the imagination.
And there's a new book. It's called, appropriately enough, Mr. Shannon, Brendan O'Regan, a man who changed Ireland. It's written by Brian O'Connell in collaboration with Cian O'Carroll, and it'll be available in the bookshops in the next few weeks. We're going to take a break now. And when we come back, we'll be finding out how Brendan O'Regan spearheaded the development here of Bunratty Castle and Folk Park. And we'll also be visiting a recreation of Celtic Ireland at Craiganoan. So don't go away. We'll talk to you again in a couple of minutes. You're welcome back to Nationwide and to the lovely Bunratty Castle and Folk Park. Now, developing this visitor experience, which opened to the public in 1960, was one of the ways in which Brendan O'Regan wanted to encourage visitors to stay and savour the whole Shannon region. And John Ruddle from the Shannon Heritage is going to explain to us how all of this came about. It was some task, John.
Well, it was a huge task they took on. And what happened was really in the early 50s, in the early days of Shannon, the Shannon Airport, there would have been quite a lot of large aircraft and they were motivated to overfly Shannon and into Dublin. So, of course, people like O'Regan were desperately trying to find ways of bringing those planes literally down from the sky and giving reasons for people to come and visit the region.
My lords, ladies, noble guests, at this stage of the evening I would like to introduce to you the ladies of the castle.
And then, of course, you have Lord Gort, an English noble gentleman who happened to come over to try to buy his family seat of Lough Cutra in Gort in County Galway, and linked up with John Hunt and O'Regan, and of course the focus became Bunratty. O'Regan saw his opportunity to create, I suppose at that time, the biggest tourism project for Ireland.
Good morning and welcome to Bunratty Castle.
You really have to give credit to those group of people: O'Regan, John Hunt, Lord Gort, Bertie Littrell, probably the four of them. There's probably more people around the scene as well, but those people were very, very much behind the whole project. O'Regan, of course, was central, because O'Regan, what he got involved in was what was called managed cooperation. He was able to bring people together, and at various parts of the project where things seemed as if they were going to fall apart, O'Regan really brought everybody together and allowed the project to continue, and probably was the biggest factor in making sure the whole thing got to the end.
John, I have been to Bunratty many, many times over the years, and I never knew Bunratty House existed. I love it.
It's fantastic, isn't it? Yes. This house was built really as the home for the last family that lived in the castle, built in and around 1801.
And you've got all such lovely features in it. I love the china, the delft, the geraniums. Everything is fab. I'm just thinking, John, you really have here done a great job of preserving quite different and various aspects of Irish heritage.
That's right. Really, there's two main themes, I suppose, in Bunratty. One is the original medieval castle, and the second then is the folk park, representing rural life in the 19th century. And we've tried to really recreate those as authentically as we possibly can.
Morning.
And it's lovely also when you go into the various, be it a cottage or be it a grand house like this, there are people dressed in the period costume and they're telling you the story of the different places. I think that's lovely.
That's one of the key
Bringing
things.
it to life. So how would you kind of place the importance of Bunratty in your Shannon Heritage portfolio?
Probably the most important that we have, and the reason I say that is because really Bunratty is all about hospitality and about welcoming visitors and about entertaining visitors, and that's really a common theme for the company. And I suppose we look back therefore to Bunratty when we're expanding the company as we're doing at the moment, and we're looking back to things that we've learned in Bunratty. That first-person interaction, that fantastic hospitality you get at the banquets, that innovation of always trying to provide a better service. That's what we're looking back to in Bunratty all of the time.
I think Brendan O'Regan would be very pleased, wouldn't he?
I think he would, yes.
15 kilometres north of Bunratty is another Shannon Heritage tourist attraction with which Brendan O'Regan was involved. It's a recreation of Celtic Ireland called Craiganoan, and Pauline Lenihan is the manager. Pauline, what a lovely place to work. The setting is gorgeous.
It's a beautiful place to work. It has, it's built on, the castle is built on rocky ground overlooking the lake, so it is ideal setting, beautiful in the forest.
Now, Brendan O'Regan had the collaboration, if you like, of John Hunt, whom we all know from the Hunt Museum, in the establishment of this particular site.
That's correct. John Hunt bought the castle here in 1965, and when he bought it, it had been left abandoned and derelict. So he called on Brendan O'Regan, who came and helped him to plan out the site itself and to develop it. He organised a helicopter in those days to come out and with the group, and the area was covered in dense forest at the time. The roof was gone from the castle. It was in very, very bad repair. So the group of four had to come through the forest and cut down briars and bushes as they went, while the helicopter hovered overhead. And the story goes that Brendan O'Regan had a long stick, and he put his white handkerchief on the top of the stick, and he shook it over and back so that the pilot could see how the group were developing underneath.
Pauline, this is saying the Brendan voyage to me.
Yes, Mary, this is the actual Brendan boat that Thames Severn, the great explorer, sailed across to America, and to prove that St. Brendan, the navigator, could have reached Newfoundland and discovered America a long time before Columbus did.
So did Tim Severn give this to Craigenown?
Yes, Tim Severn, he was on the Late Late Show, the story goes, speaking to Gay Byrne about the voyage, and John and Gertrude Hunt saw the programme, and they decided they would ask Tim Severn could they store it here, because he had no place to store the boat. So he eventually agreed that the boat could be stored in Craigenown, where people could come and view the boat.
Do you know what I'm thinking? It's no harm for people in this day and age to realise that these were the conditions of our ancestors.
Oh yes, I think when people come through, they do not realise when they come in the door what they're going to witness. But they come back and they say, you know, that was really informative. And they enjoy interacting with our animators, who show and demonstrate the different ways of life in the different periods as you go through.
I'm sure you get very positive reactions.
We get extremely positive reaction. People love the site.
Craigenown is a fascinating place, as is Bunratty, and both provide us with an interesting and genuine insight into where we have come from Celtic times right through to a more modern era. And you know, Shannon Heritage, which runs both of these tourist attractions, is just one strand of Brendan O'Regan's rich and enduring legacy to the Irish people. He died in 2008 at the age of 90, and I really feel that we can say of him truly and genuinely, Ní bheidh le héad a rís tán. Sin deir leis it leor, I bhaith goibhnis agus go dtéis slán.
How did they get on? Celebrity Operation Transformation concludes tonight at 9:35 here on RTE1. Next tonight though, how to cook well with Rory O'Connell.